In the dense forests of Vietnam, American troops confronted 5 deadly threats that had nothing to do with enemy soldiers. These biological dangers remain seared into the memories of veterans who specifically asked us to share their stories, experiences that continue haunting them half a century later. This isn't the sanitized version from history books. These are authentic accounts from those who made it through. Think you understand what terrified troops in Vietnam? Prepare to discover something new. For those who served and encountered these dangers, you already know the truth. We're about to explore the 5 deadliest jungle inhabitants that transformed Vietnam into a zone of biological combat where danger didn't always wear a uniform. These organisms killed, injured, and mentally devastated American forces in ways no training could anticipate. Let's begin. From 1965 through 1973, more than 2.7 million U.S. military personnel served in Vietnam. Military mental health research from that period uncovered something startling. When combat veterans identified their greatest fears, specific jungle dangers consistently ranked higher than enemy fighters. Classified medical documentation from the 93rd Evacuation Hospital shows non-combat biological injury numbers that remain partially restricted even now. The forest environment itself became an opponent that operated continuously, never withdrew, and discriminated against neither rank nor skill level. These weren't rare incidents, they were everyday realities for every soldier moving through dense jungle canopy. Military field guides distributed to personnel dedicated more space to biological hazards than to guerrilla warfare techniques. The emotional burden was overwhelming. You could excel as the most capable fighter in your unit and still perish horribly from something bullets couldn't stop. What follows are the 5 predators that characterize the biological dimension of the Vietnam conflict. The cruel paradox was instant. The same plant life offering protection from gunfire concealed a threat that attacked without notice.
Let's examine why this particular danger created such widespread fear that it altered how soldiers navigated every jungle setting. The bamboo viper, nicknamed the two-step snake by troops, embodied evolutionary perfection in ambush hunting. These reptiles achieved total camouflage within Vietnamese bamboo clusters, their green scales indistinguishable from the surrounding plants. They positioned themselves in the 3 to 6 foot vegetation zone, precisely where soldiers focused their attention during patrol movements. Medical records from 1968 documented 397 verified bamboo viper attacks on American forces in 3rd Corps alone. The toxin triggered instant hemorrhagic tissue death, with cellular breakdown starting within 8 to 12 minutes post-bite. A combat medic recalled discovering victims. The swelling began immediately, racing up the extremity like air being pumped beneath the skin, except the skin transformed to purple-black as it expanded. Every bamboo grove became a potential lethal zone, forcing troops to decide between tactical concealment and biological security. The serpent's heat detection organs enabled them to sense soldiers from 18 inches away, meaning they always knew when troops approached. Veterans consistently recounted the horrifying speed. The snake would bite, deliver venom through 6 to 8 millimeter fangs, and vanish into bamboo before the soldier comprehended what happened. One Marine rifleman remembered, "You'd hear someone scream, and when you spun around, nothing was there, just your buddy clutching his leg with the wound already ballooning. We came to dread the bamboo more than incoming fire." Standard jungle boots offered no defense, since bamboo vipers targeted calf and thigh areas 73% of the time. MACV medical data indicated medevac arrival times in thick jungle averaged 45 to 90 minutes, far beyond the critical window for pit viper antivenom treatment. The mental impact was crushing. Soldiers observed tissue blacken and decay while awaiting evacuation, understanding that survival might require amputation. The odor became recognizable, decomposing flesh combined with the metallic scent of internal bleeding. A combat surgeon remembered soldiers arrived with limbs double their normal size, skin rupturing from internal pressure, pleading with us to amputate before the death spread to essential organs. The physical agony paired with the psychological horror of witnessing your own flesh perish destroyed combat capability even in those who survived, and that represented just the beginning.
The despair struck when soldiers understood their footwear, their preparation, their weaponry meant nothing against this hunter. Let's explore why this danger created such pervasive fear that it made sleep deadly. The Malayan Pit Viper functioned with nocturnal accuracy that eliminated the possibility of safe rest. These snakes reached 36 to 48 inches in length and possessed heat-tracking abilities accurate to half a degree Celsius at 24 inches. Military incident documentation recorded 612 nighttime attacks during 1969-1970 throughout all combat regions. The toxin caused complete coagulopathy. Blood stopped clotting entirely, resulting in internal hemorrhaging that could persist for 72 hours after the bite. Soldiers would hemorrhage from their eyes, nose, ears, and previous injuries as their clotting mechanisms depleted. One field hospital record stated, patient arrived 6 hours post-bite with bleeding from every opening, including old insect bite locations. Plasma and whole blood transfusions failed to restore coagulation. Standard defensive perimeters provided no safety because Malayan pit vipers actively pursued warm-blooded targets. During darkness, the snakes entered sleeping areas attracted by body heat patterns and struck exposed skin, usually faces, necks, and hands. Infantry units maintained 50% watch schedules, meaning half the unit remained vulnerable constantly. The psychological fear was total. Sleep transformed into a potential death sentence. An army specialist described the paranoia. You'd lie in your hammock with every leaf rustle making your heart explode. You'd use your flashlight, see nothing, attempt sleep, then feel something cross your chest. I watched soldiers go 3 to 4 days without proper sleep, just terror naps. They became more dangerous to us than effective in battle. Night operation casualty documentation shows 23% of non-combat medical evacuations stemmed from pit viper encounters. The coagulopathy generated situations where small wounds became lethal and healed injuries spontaneously reopened. Soldiers who survived the initial strike faced 48 to 96 hours of medical emergency, where any physical injury could trigger unstoppable bleeding. The mental impact exceeded fear. It created powerlessness. You could receive medevac treatment with antivenom and still hemorrhage to death 3 days later from a dental filling coming loose. One Navy corpsman recalled, "I observed a lance corporal bleed out from his gums following a Malayan pit viper bite. We'd controlled the external bleeding, believed we had him stable, then his mouth simply filled with blood and he drowned in it. We were helpless." The scent of blood became permanent in field hospitals, thick and copper sweet, mixing with jungle moisture. This predator didn't merely strike, it condemned.
The invisible danger materialized when soldiers recognized the jungle's dominant predator viewed humans as territorial invaders. Let's understand why this created such widespread fear that made confrontation unavoidable. King Cobras represented nature's ultimate biological weapon, 12 to 18 feet of neurotoxic lethality that actively protected territory against human encroachment. These serpents could inject 400 to 500 milligrams of venom in one bite, sufficient to kill 20 adult humans or drop an Asian elephant within 3 hours. Military wildlife encounter records documented 89 King Cobra confrontations during 1967 to 1968, with 34 producing fatalities. The toxin attacked the nervous system directly, causing progressive paralysis, beginning with the diaphragm and breathing muscles. Victims maintained full consciousness as their bodies failed, unable to move or breathe, while their minds remained alert. A battalion surgeon described the clinical presentation. They'd arrive talking, explaining exactly what occurred. Within 15 minutes, they couldn't move their arms. 20 minutes, they couldn't breathe. 25 minutes, they were just eyes staring, pleading, while we manually ventilated them. Unlike other serpents that fled humans, King Cobras held position and advanced when challenged. They could elevate 1/3 of their body length, positioning their fangs at chest level for average-height soldiers. The hood display became an unmistakable threat signal, measuring 12 to 18 inches across. Combat documentation describes soldiers meeting cobras that refused to yield trail positions, forcing entire patrols to reroute or engage directly. One infantry sergeant recalled the terror. This creature rose to my chest level, spread its hood, and produced a hiss loud enough to hear over jungle sounds. It wasn't frightened, we were. It began advancing towards us, and our point man emptied his M16 into it. Even dying, it struck twice, getting him in the shoulder. He died in the helicopter, paralyzed but conscious, attempting to scream with frozen vocal cords. The neurotoxic venom generated a uniquely terrifying death, complete awareness imprisoned in a non-functioning body. Military medical procedures required manual ventilation for King Cobra victims because mechanical respirators weren't available at forward locations. This meant medics physically operated breathing bags for hours while observing soldiers die gradually. The psychological impact on both victim and medic proved devastating. Victims could see, hear, and feel everything while drowning in their own saliva, unable to swallow. A combat medic stated, "I manually ventilated a kid for 4 hours awaiting dust-off. He was 19, and I watched the life drain from his eyes while his brain stayed functional. He understood he was dying, and neither of us could do anything except maintain that bag pressure." The hissing sound King Cobras produced, audible from 30 feet away, became an audio trigger that could freeze entire patrols instantly. And the jungle held more.
The claustrophobic horror surfaced when soldiers discovered their sleeping quarters had already been compromised. Let's examine why this created such pervasive fear that made night the adversary. The Malaysian Krait represented stealth hunting perfected across millions of years. These snakes measured 3 to 5 feet in length, possessed completely black coloring, and moved silently through any terrain. Their hunting behavior targeted sleeping humans, specifically attracted to body warmth and carbon dioxide exhalation. Military base perimeter casualty documentation recorded 156 Krait bite incidents during 1968 to 1971 at established fire bases with active security. The toxin combined neurotoxins and myotoxins, causing paralysis while simultaneously destroying muscle tissue. Soldiers would awaken with complete respiratory paralysis, unable to summon help, unable to move, feeling their chest muscles dissolve while their minds remained clear. One base camp medical log stated, "Patient discovered at 0600 during routine check, alive but totally paralyzed, eyes tracking movement. Bite occurred approximately 0200 based on tissue death progression. Patient expired at 0645 from respiratory failure after 4 hours and 45 minutes of conscious paralysis." Kraits actively sought enclosed sleeping spaces, making standard sleeping bags and hammocks preferred hunting territory. The snakes would enter occupied bedrolls, coil against the soldier's warmth, and strike when the human shifted during sleep. Defensive countermeasures proved useless. Netting, elevated positions, perimeter guards made no difference. The psychological impact destroyed sleep discipline throughout entire units. Soldiers developed insomnia conditions, preferring exhaustion to vulnerability. An artillery specialist described the paranoia. "You'd inspect your sleeping bag 10 times, shake it thoroughly, lie down, then feel every fabric fold like it's a snake. I slept sitting upright for 7 months, leaning against ammunition crates because I couldn't force myself horizontal. I preferred facing incoming mortars awake than that creature in my bed." Base camp mental health documentation shows 41% of soldiers exhibited sleep disruption symptoms consistent with environmental anxiety disorder.
The myotoxic element of krait venom liquefied muscle tissue at the cellular level, causing rhabdomyolysis that released muscle fiber contents into circulation. This generated secondary kidney failure in 67% of krait bite victims who survived the initial paralysis. The pain was described as internal burning, like acid dissolving muscle from within. Soldiers remained conscious throughout the entire process, feeling their own bodies consume themselves. A battalion surgeon stated, "We'd have krait victims in the ward who couldn't move but could feel everything. They'd describe the sensation as their muscles turning to hot liquid beneath their skin. Their urine turned dark brown from muscle proteins, and we'd observe their kidney function crash while they stayed awake through it all." The smell of necrotic muscle tissue, sweet and putrid simultaneously, became synonymous with krait strikes, and still, one more terror remained.
The inescapable dread crystallized when soldiers realized water offered no refuge from this predator. Let's understand why this created such pervasive fear that eliminated the concept of safe zones. The Banded Krait operated in both land and water environments with equal lethality. Measuring 4 to 6 feet with distinctive yellow and black bands, these snakes hunted rice paddies, rivers, and standing water, precisely where soldiers conducted operations and obtained water. Military environmental hazard documentation recorded 203 Banded Krait encounters during riverine operations in the Mekong Delta between 1966 and 1970. The venom delivered 15 times greater neurotoxic potency than cobra venom, causing complete neuromuscular failure in 25 to 40 minutes. Soldiers struck while crossing water died midstream, their paralyzed bodies sinking as conscious minds registered drowning. One river patrol boat operator recalled, "We extracted someone from the water and he was still alive, eyes open but completely rigid. The medic said he'd been bitten by a banded krait while wading. The individual drowned in 3 feet of water, fully aware, muscles locked, unable to lift his head above surface." Banded kraits contaminated every water source, making hydration a calculated gamble. Standard water purification tablets proved ineffective against venom, and visual inspection was impossible in murky delta water. Soldiers faced a dilemma: dehydration or potential envenomation with every canteen refill. The psychological pressure was constant and accumulating. Heat casualties from dehydration increased 34% in units operating in known Banded Krait territory because soldiers postponed water consumption from paranoia. A Marine Force recon member described the impossible decision. "You're carrying 80 pounds of gear in 95-degree heat with 90% humidity. You're losing water through perspiration faster than you can replace it. But you witnessed what happened to Jackson when he filled his canteen from that stream. Banded Krait in the water bit him on the hand. He was dead in 30 minutes, drowning on dry land because his lungs wouldn't function." Medical documentation confirmed 23 deaths attributed to venom-induced respiratory paralysis during water procurement activities. The neurological shutdown generated the ultimate horror: conscious drowning without water present. The diaphragm paralysis meant soldiers suffocated while their brains remained active and aware. They could see rescuers, hear voices, feel hands on their bodies, but couldn't communicate, couldn't breathe, couldn't stop the darkness advancing. The final moments involved panic, complete terror, and total helplessness. A Navy corpsman stated, "Banded Krait victims had this expression in their eyes, pure fear. They'd grab your hand with whatever strength remained, squeezing, trying to communicate they were still conscious while their lungs shut down. You'd watch the light fade from their eyes, and you knew they were conscious until the very end, experiencing every second of suffocation." The sound of labored, failing respiration became an audio signature that haunted medics for decades. Survivors described the sensation as drowning in air, desperately attempting to inhale while the body refused to respond.
Now you comprehend all 5 terrors. What unified all 5 predators was the complete psychological reversal they generated. The jungle that provided tactical advantage became the primary danger. Soldiers trained to combat human adversaries found themselves defenseless against biological opponents that required no ideology, showed no compassion, and couldn't be reasoned with. The shared psychological element was absolute helplessness. These threats couldn't be outfought, outmaneuvered, or intimidated. A soldier could be the most decorated marksman in his unit and still die screaming from a 2-step snakebite. The bamboo viper eliminated concealment. The Malayan Pit Viper eliminated rest. The King Cobra eliminated retreat. The Malaysian Krait eliminated shelter. The Banded Krait eliminated basic survival resources. Together, they generated an environment where every natural human need, seeking cover, sleeping, drinking water, became potentially fatal. Military psychiatric research from the VA hospital system reveals Vietnam veterans exhibit PTSD triggers related to environmental stimuli at rates 340% higher than veterans of other conflicts. The sound of rustling vegetation, the sight of standing water, the sensation of fabric against skin and darkness, these harmless stimuli can trigger full panic responses decades after service. The enduring psychological damage from biological threat exposure manifests differently than combat trauma. According to military psychiatric research conducted by the Department of Veterans Affairs between 1975 and 1985, soldiers who experienced snake encounters demonstrated persistent hypervigilance patterns, sleep disruption disorders, and environmental anxiety that exceeded combat-related PTSD in severity and duration. The psychological uniqueness of Vietnam's biological warfare originated from its unpredictability and inevitability. Combat was sporadic, but the jungle was constant. Every moment outside fortified positions meant exposure to predators that could kill, regardless of combat skill or experience. The casualty figures tell a story military historians frequently overlook. Non-combat biological casualties in Vietnam totaled 8,734 documented cases between 1965 and 1973, with estimated unreported incidents potentially doubling that number. Of those documented cases, 256 resulted in death or permanent disability. These weren't acceptable losses. These were preventable tragedies that resulted from deploying soldiers into an environment their training and equipment couldn't protect them from. The psychological impact extended beyond individual trauma to unit cohesion. When your foxhole companion dies from a bamboo viper strike, trust in your environment collapses entirely.
These weren't just soldiers navigating tactical challenges. They were young men, average age 19 years old, facing biological horrors their high school science classes never prepared them for. They were sons who wrote letters home describing snakes in their sleeping bags, husbands who developed insomnia disorders that destroyed their marriages, fathers who couldn't take their children camping because the smell of canvas triggered panic attacks. The statistical casualties represent brothers, friends, and neighbors who experienced death by drowning on land, conscious paralysis, or watching their own tissue die in real time. Their families received telegrams explaining their loved ones died from non-combat casualties, a bureaucratic phrase that erased the terror, the suffering, and the biological warfare these men endured. The ongoing trauma manifests in VA hospital systems today, where aging Vietnam veterans still receive treatment for anxiety disorders triggered by environmental stimuli encountered 50 years ago.
To every veteran who faced these biological nightmares alongside human enemies, your service, your survival, and your willingness to share these experiences matter. The terrors you faced in Vietnam's jungles were real, validated by military medical records and psychiatric research. If you served in Vietnam and encountered these predators, your testimony in the comments helps younger generations understand what combat really meant in that conflict. If this video helped you understand what your father, grandfather, or uncle experienced, hit that like button and subscribe for more unfiltered military history. Share this with anyone who needs to understand that Vietnam wasn't just about firefights. It was about surviving an environment designed by evolution to kill. Remember what was asked of these soldiers. Thank you for watching.